News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris. And there's your closing bell for this Friday on Wall Street, which is ending this big Fed week with stocks reaching for all-time highs. We bring you all the closing numbers each day here at Bloomberg. The S&P 500 gained 33 points. NASDAQ gained 161 points. The Dow up 172 points. The 10-year Treasury yield at 4.12%. The 2-year yield at 3.57%. A panel of new vaccine advisors handpicked by Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has voted to end the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's universal recommendation that people of all ages get COVID shots. Now, the recommendation is that you discuss getting a COVID shot with your doctor first, but the panel also voted against requiring a prescription for a COVID vaccine. Congress has moved closer to an October 1st government shutdown as Senate Democrats and Republicans blocked each other's plans to provide temporary funding. Democrats are demanding a boost to health care spending. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer.
We need bipartisan legislation to keep the government open and meet the needs of the American people, especially on costs, specifically health care costs.
But time is running out as the Senate leaves for a week-long break, meaning they won't return to Washington until September 29th. The funding deadline is October 1st. President Trump says the U.S. and China are closer to a final agreement on the sale of TikTok's U.S. operations to American investors. China says the government respects the wishes of the company and would be happy to see negotiations lead to a solution that complies with China's laws. Today's call between Trump and China's President Xi Jinping did not offer details on the framework deal. The president also said he would be meeting with Xi on the sidelines of the upcoming Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit. The UN is preparing emergency measures to slash global peacekeeping operations if funding doesn't come through. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres plans to meet with President Trump during the UN General Assembly meeting in New York.
We are preparing to drastically reduce our peacekeeping operations. The problem is that peacekeepers, that many of them are in places where there is no peace to keep, with terrorist groups, with armed groups, they are sometimes the last resort for the protection of civilians. And those are the ones that will suffer.
Hear our entire interview with UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres on the Bloomberg Talks podcast. The central bank lowered its benchmark rate by 0.25 percentage point as widely expected and penciled in 2 more moves this year. New Fed Governor Stephen Miran was the only vote against that 0.25 point cut. He argued for a 50 basis point cut, telling CNBC that his decision to dissent was driven by his view that President Trump's tariff policies have had no material impact on inflation.
I don't see very significant tariff inflation. I see very little evidence of any of it to date. I see disinflation coming from the border policies, and I see some downward pressures coming from other forces too, like deregulation, some other items that I'll be walking through next week.
Fed Governor Stephen Miran says that is when he will speak at the Economic Club of New York. He's breaking with Fed tradition and not issuing a written dissent to explain his reasoning. The Fed's decision is getting solid marks from former St. Louis Fed President James Bullard. He's one of the candidates who may succeed Jay Powell next year. He says the central bank looks set up to cut 2 more times this year.
I think the committee was worried about the non-farm payrolls that revised the previous months down considerably. You know, non-farm payrolls is kind of the key number for the Fed. So I think that made them a little bit nervous.
Bullard was a guest on Bloomberg Surveillance. Watch the full conversation on the Bloomberg Podcasts page on YouTube. Minneapolis Fed President Neil Kashkari supported the move and characterized any coming reductions as insurance as the impact of tariffs plays out.
We're not okay with 3% inflation. I'm confident that we are going to get inflation back down to 2%, but these tariffs have pushed inflation back up, and we're having to adjust policy to try to accommodate and keep the labor markets strong at the same time.
Kashkari tells CNBC he believes the risk of a sharp increase in unemployment warrants the committee taking some action to support the labor market. Bloomberg News is reporting late-night TV host Jimmy Kimmel met with Disney executives yesterday, and that the soonest his show can return is September 22nd. They are reportedly discussing the fate of his show and whether Kimmel will have to issue an apology. FCC Commissioner Ana Gomez says ABC put the First Amendment in danger by pulling the show.
And what happens every time we see this cowardly corporate capitulation is a further fraying of a foundation of our democracy, and that's freedom of speech and freedom of the press.
Hear that entire interview with the FCC's Ana Gomez on the Bloomberg Talks podcast. And Republican Senator Ted Cruz criticized FCC Chair Brendan Carr, calling his actions mafioso behavior. Cruz says he does not believe the government should punish media companies over political disagreements and says a defamation case would have been a better approach. Cruz's criticism of Carr was applauded by Republican Senator Tom Tillis. Trump administration officials are reportedly in discussions with the Taliban about reestablishing a small U.S. military presence at Afghanistan's Bagram air base. Sources tell the Wall Street Journal the base would serve as a launch point for counterterrorism operations, one potential component of a broader diplomatic effort by the Trump administration to normalize relations with the Taliban. That's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg.